The last thing my father said to me before slamming the door was, "Don't ever come back." I was 11 years old, standing on a rainy sidewalk with a garbage bag full of clothes and no idea what I had done wrong. For 20 years, I believed the story everyone told me, that my father simply didn't want me. I built a life without him, buried the questions, and tried to move on. Then 2 decades later, a lawyer called with 6 words that changed everything. "Your father left something for you." And suddenly the past came rushing back. And before we continue, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. I'm also curious, where are you watching from and what time is it there right now? Let me know in the comments below. Now let's get back to the story. My name is Claire Bennett, and I was 31 years old when I finally learned that the worst day of my childhood wasn't what I thought it was. For 20 years I believed my father had stopped loving me. That belief shaped nearly every part of my life. It affected relationships, friendships, trust, even success. Because no matter what I achieved, a small part of me always wondered the same thing. What was so wrong with me that my own father didn't want me? I was 11 years old when everything changed. Before that, my life had been normal. Not perfect, but normal. My father, Daniel Bennett, worked long hours as a mechanic. He wasn't overly affectionate, but he was dependable. He attended my school plays, helped me with science projects, made pancakes every Saturday morning. Then almost overnight something changed. He became distant, quiet, distracted. At first I thought it was work stress. Then weeks turned into months. The man who used to ask about my day barely spoke during dinner. The man who never missed a school event suddenly stopped showing up. Every time I asked what was wrong, he would simply say, "Nothing." But it wasn't nothing. I could feel it. The tension in the house kept growing. Then came the night that destroyed everything. It was raining. I remember that clearly. I had just come home from school when I heard my father arguing with someone on the phone. His voice sounded angrier than I had ever heard before. The moment he noticed me standing in the hallway, he immediately ended the call. A few hours later, he called me into the living room. I thought I was in trouble. Instead, he said something I never expected. "You'll be staying with Aunt Linda for a while." I stared at him. "What?" "You need to pack your things." Thought he was joking. He wasn't. Asked why. Then I asked again. And again. Each time his answer became shorter. Colder. Finally I started crying. What did I do? For a brief second something painful flashed across his face. Then it disappeared. "You didn't do anything." "Then why are you sending me away?" His jaw tightened. "Because that's what's best." Those words felt like a knife. I begged him to explain. Begged him to let me stay. Begged him to tell me what was happening. He refused. The next morning Aunt Linda arrived. By that afternoon I was gone. Standing on her porch with a garbage bag full of clothes and a heart full of questions. Over the next several years Aunt Linda became my safe place. She gave me stability, encouragement, a real home. But she never explained what happened. Whenever I asked about my father, she would simply say, "One day you'll understand." I hated that answer. Because I didn't want understanding. I wanted my dad. As I got older I tried reaching out. Birthday cards, letters, emails, even a few phone calls. Nothing. No response. No explanation. Just silence. Eventually I stopped trying. I graduated college. Built a career. Bought a house. Created a life I was proud of. But the question never disappeared. Then 20 years after the day he sent me away, my phone rang. The caller identified himself as attorney Michael Reeves. There was no easy way to say it. My father had passed away. I sat frozen as he explained that Daniel Bennett had left specific instructions regarding his estate. Instructions involving me. Then the lawyer said something that immediately made my heart race. "There is a sealed letter from your father." I couldn't speak. Michael paused before continuing. "And according to his written instructions, it can only be opened when you're present." Suddenly, for the first time in 20 years, I realized I might finally learn the truth. 3 days later, I walked into Michael Reeves' law office carrying 20 years of anger, confusion, and unanswered questions. The building was quiet, professional, ordinary, which somehow made everything feel even more unreal. A receptionist guided me to a conference room. Michael was already waiting. He stood as I entered. Tall, gray-haired and serious. The kind of man who looked like he had spent decades delivering difficult news. "Thank you for coming, Claire. I nodded. I wasn't sure I trusted myself to speak. The sealed envelope sat on the table between us. My father's handwriting covered the front. Just seeing it made my chest tighten. I hadn't seen his handwriting since I was 11 years old. For a moment I simply stared at it. Then I carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. The first line immediately stopped my breathing. Claire, if you're reading this, then I failed to stay alive long enough to tell you the truth myself. My hands began shaking. I kept reading. The letter described the months before he sent me away. Months I barely remembered. Months that had seemed ordinary from a child's perspective. But according to him they had been anything but ordinary. He wrote that he had discovered information involving someone connected to our family. Information that frightened him. Information he believed placed me in danger. At first I thought there had to be some mistake. The story sounded impossible. I looked up at Michael. This doesn't make any sense. Michael slowly slid a file across the table. That's why your father asked me to provide these documents. I opened the folder. Inside were police reports, legal records, old investigation summaries. Most of them were over 20 years old. As I read, my confusion slowly turned into shock. My father hadn't become distant because he stopped loving me. He had become terrified. Terrified of something happening to me. Terrified of people discovering what he knew. The deeper I read, the more pieces started falling into place. Suddenly I remembered strange incidents from childhood. Arguments that stopped when I entered a room. Conversations that adults refused to explain. Unexpected visits from people I didn't recognize. Events that had never made sense before. Now they did. I looked back at the letter. My father's words became harder to read through the tears forming in my eyes. He explained that sending me to Aunt Linda had been the hardest decision of his life. But he believed it was the only way to keep me safe. Safe from questions. Safe from attention. Safe from people who might have used me to gain leverage over him. Then came the revelation that shook me most. Aunt Linda had known everything. For 20 years. Every time she told me, "One day you'll understand," she hadn't been avoiding the truth. She had been protecting it. Protecting a promise she made to my father. I sat back in stunned silence. Everything I thought I knew was collapsing. 20 years of resentment. 20 years of blame. 20 years of believing I had been abandoned. Then Michael handed me another folder. This was also left for you. Inside were records spanning 2 decades. Scholarship payments. Anonymous financial contributions. Letters of recommendation. Emergency assistance during difficult periods of my life. All connected to one person. My father. Even after sending me away, he had quietly watched over me from a distance. The tears finally came. But before I could process everything, I reached the final page of the letter. And what I read there changed my understanding of my father forever. Because the real reason he sacrificed our relationship had nothing to do with protecting himself. It had everything to do with protecting me. I stared at the final page of my father's letter for what felt like hours. The words blurred through my tears. Then I read them again. And again. Because part of me still couldn't believe what I was seeing. The final secret wasn't about money. It wasn't about family drama. It wasn't even about the people who had frightened him 20 years earlier. It was about me. My father wrote that after discovering the danger surrounding our family, he realized there were only 2 choices. Keep me close and risk exposing me to the situation. Or send me away somewhere safe and let me hate him. He chose the second option. Not because it was easier. Because it was harder. Because it guaranteed he would lose the one person he loved most. At the bottom of the page he had written a single sentence that shattered me. I'd rather have you alive and angry than close and in danger. For 20 years I believed my father had abandoned me. The truth was far worse. And far more beautiful. He had sacrificed his reputation. His relationship with me. His chance to watch me grow up. Just to protect me. I covered my mouth as sobs finally escaped. Across the table Michael remained silent. Giving me space. Giving me time. Eventually I left the law office and drove straight to Aunt Linda's house. She opened the door before I even knocked. The moment she saw my face she knew. "You read it," she whispered. I nodded. For several seconds neither of us spoke. Then she pulled me into a hug. The same kind of hug she had given me when I was 11 years old. The same kind that made everything feel safe. "He loved you every day," she said quietly. "I know. And for the first time in my life, I truly did. Over the next several weeks, I went through everything my father had left behind. Old photographs. Letters he never sent. Birthday cards he wrote but never mailed. A box filled with newspaper clippings about my accomplishments. College graduation. Career milestones. Community awards. Moments he had quietly followed from afar. I realized he had never stopped being my father. He had simply loved me from a distance he never wanted. 1 month later, I visited his resting place. The cemetery sat on a peaceful hillside overlooking a small lake. I brought the letter with me, and one final note of my own. Standing there, I read it aloud. I told him about my life, my career, my home, the dreams I had achieved. Then I told him something I should have said years ago. I forgive you. The wind moved softly through the trees. For the first time in 20 years, the anger was gone. The questions were gone. The hurt was finally beginning to heal. As I turned to leave, I looked back one last time. For most of my life, I thought my father had thrown me away. Now I knew the truth. The man I spent 20 years hating had spent 20 years protecting me. And somehow, knowing that felt like finally coming home. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most are carrying burdens we never see. This story isn't just about forgiveness. It's about discovering that the truth can look completely different from what we believed for years. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Have you ever learned a life-changing truth years later? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next story.